I stepped into the backyard with a mug still warm in my hand and stopped so abruptly the coffee sloshed over the rim. My father was standing near the maple tree, arms crossed, watching a woman with a tablet walk the perimeter of the yard. She paused, crouched, and stretched a measuring tape across the grass like she had done this 100 times before. "You're early," I said, because it was the only neutral thing my mouth could find. Dad did not look at me. We needed daylight. That was when I noticed my sister, Kimberly, sitting on the patio chair, scrolling on her phone. Her husband, Derek, leaned against the fence, smiling faintly, as if this were a surprise party and I just had not caught on yet. The woman straightened. "Hi, I'm Sandra," she said lightly. "I'm just getting some preliminary measurements. Measurements for what I asked." Dad finally turned. His voice was calm, practiced. "We're exploring options. This property has appreciated more than we expected." Right then, before I could respond, Olive's bike rolled across the patio stones behind me. She had been drawing with chalk all morning. Roads, stop signs, little stick figures holding hands. The bike tire went straight through the center of it. Kimberly laughed. "Boys," she said, even though her twins were not hers alone to excuse. I set the mug down carefully. "You brought a real estate agent here without telling me." Dad waved a hand. "Don't make this dramatic." "Bethany." I heard Olive stop moving. I did not turn around. Dad pointed toward the yard. "You've always managed with less." "The twins need more space." The woman with the tablet nodded politely. "Already typing." "And what exactly are you saying I should do?" I asked. "You and Olive can move into the garage apartment," Dad said. "Temporarily. It's practical." Derek smiled wider. "Kids adapt." I felt the shift then, the moment when a decision had already been made and I was only being informed. "This is Grandma Lillian's house," I said. "You don't get to reassign rooms like it's a storage unit." Dad's jaw tightened. "I handle the finances. I know what's best." Behind me. Olive knelt to gather her chalk pieces. She did not cry. She lined them up by color and put them back in the box as if she were packing something fragile. Right after that moment, I need to be clear about something. The entire content of the video is a fictional work created by the writing team of the Revenge Sins channel, intended to reflect common conflicts in families and society, helping viewers recognize their emotions and choose a more positive way of living. "Bethany," Kimberly said softly, "the way you speak to someone you think is being unreasonable. You don't need all this space." I looked at her. "My daughter does." Dad sighed. "You're being emotional." Olive stood then, clutching the chalk box to her chest. "Mom," she said quietly, "should I put my things somewhere else?" The agent glanced up, uncomfortable now. I stepped toward Olive and rested a hand on her shoulder. "No," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." Dad's voice sharpened. "We're listing next week." I met his eyes. "You should have told me before you brought strangers to measure my life." He shrugged. "Family doesn't need permission." I smiled, thin and controlled, because years of practice had taught me how, if this story resonates with you, if you have ever been told to shrink for someone else's comfort, stay with me. What happened next was not loud. It was not fast. But it changed everything. That night, Olive ate her dinner without complaint. She pushed peas into neat lines on her plate, careful not to let them touch anything else. I watched her from the sink, drying dishes we had barely used. "Did Grandpa mean it?" she asked, not looking up. "Mean what?" "Honey." She paused, then said, "That I take up too much space." I set the towel down. "No, he was wrong." She nodded, like she had expected that answer, then went back to arranging her food. The quiet stretched between us, heavy and deliberate. After dinner, I found her in her room folding her clothes, not playing, folding. Each shirt smoothed flat, stacked with precision that did not belong to a 9-year-old. "Olive," I said gently, "what are you doing?" She kept her eyes on the fabric. Just in case. In case of what? She shrugged. If we have to move fast. Something in my chest tightened. Who told you that? No one, she said. I just know. I sat on the edge of her bed. You don't need to pack. She hesitated, then finally looked at me. If I stay really quiet, she said. Will we be allowed to stay? The sentence landed between us like a dropped glass. I reached for her hands, and she let me hold them, but her fingers stayed tense. You don't have to earn space, I said. Not here. Not anywhere. She searched my face, not for comfort, but for certainty. Then she nodded, slow and careful, and went back to folding, not because she believed me, because she did not want to argue. Later, when she brushed her teeth, I heard my father's voice echoing in my head. You've always managed with less. He had said it like praise, like a compliment he had been giving me my entire life. When Olive crawled into bed, she pulled her blanket up to her chin. Mom. Yes. Did I do something wrong today? I swallowed. No. Are you sure? Yes, I said. I promise. She relaxed just enough to close her eyes, but she did not fall asleep right away. I stayed beside her until her breathing slowed, until her body stopped bracing for something that might happen. I went to the hallway and leaned against the wall, listening. I had spent years convincing myself that my family meant well, that they were practical, that I was strong enough to absorb the impact. But strength had taught my daughter how to disappear. If you are listening to this and recognize that silence, that careful shrinking, stay with me. This is where I stopped pretending it was harmless. I did not sleep much that night. I lay awake replaying conversations I had once brushed off as harmless. By morning, my head felt clearer, colder. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, not to work, but to look at numbers I had avoided naming for too long. When my sister called, I answered. You seemed tense yesterday, Kimberly said. Dad's just trying to be fair. Fair to whom I asked. She sighed, already tired of me. You're single. You work. You're fine. Fine. That word had cost me more than she knew. I scrolled through my bank statements as she spoke. Do you remember your wedding deposit? Of course, she said. You offered to help. I transferred $15,000. That was years ago, she replied quickly. 14 months ago. I said. You said you'd pay it back after the honeymoon. Silence. Then a laugh. Beth, you know how things got complicated. I kept scrolling. Your fertility treatments. You called it a temporary loan. She lowered her voice. That was a sensitive time. It was $28,000, I said. You told me Dad would cover it later. He meant to, she said. Things just got busy. I clicked again. Credit cards I had paid off because Dad said it was hurting his credit. Property taxes he said he would reimburse once the paperwork cleared. By the time I closed the laptop, the number was sitting in my chest like a weight. $68,000 in 14 months. Not gifts, not investments. Money that flowed out and never returned. You're keeping score now, Kimberly asked. I'm remembering, I said. You're acting like we took advantage of you. I pictured Olive at family dinners, sitting quietly while her cousins opened gifts. The way my mother called her that sweet little girl instead of her name. The way family photos always needed someone to hold the camera. She's my daughter, I said. You never say her name. Kimberly's tone sharpened. That's not fair. No, I said calmly. It's accurate. Dad called later that afternoon. Your sister says you're upset. I am. I said. You always take things personally, he replied. We rely on you because you're capable. Capable of paying. I said. He exhaled, annoyed. You make good money. You don't need to be counting dollars. I needed that money. I said. I just didn't know it yet. There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. Family doesn't nickel and dime each other. Family doesn't ask one child to carry everyone else. I said. He ended the call without responding. That evening, Olive sat at the table coloring. She pressed hard enough that the crayon snapped. She stared at the broken pieces, then quietly chose another color. I watched her adjust without complaint, without noise, and I understood something I had refused to face. My family had not only taken my money, they had taken my certainty. And my daughter had learned to live inside the gap I kept calling love. I visited Grandma Lillian the next afternoon. She sat by the window of the assisted living common room, hands folded in her lap, watching people pass as if she were counting time instead of faces. "You look tired," she said when she saw me. "I didn't sleep." I replied. She nodded. "Your father came by this week." My shoulders tightened. "What did he want to talk about the house?" she said evenly. "He always talks like decisions are already finished." I pulled a chair closer. "Did you agree to anything?" Her eyes met mine, sharp despite the tremor in her hands. "No." Relief washed through me, followed by anger that surprised me with its force. "He brought a real estate agent to the yard, with Kimberly and Derek." Lillian sighed. "Then he is moving faster than I thought." I leaned forward. Faster than what she studied me for a long moment. "Bethany, how much do you know about how the finances have been handled?" "I know he has power of attorney," I said. "He said it was easier that way." "It was supposed to be," she replied. "But easy things invite quiet mistakes." I thought of the bills I paid, the repairs I authorized, the insurance I renewed without question. "I've been covering everything for the house." "I know," she said. "You kept it alive." A nurse passed by and smiled politely. Lillian waited until she was out of earshot. "Your father treats the house like leverage," she continued, "not like a home." "He told me it was a family asset," I said. She scoffed softly. "Family asset means whoever speaks loudest." I swallowed. "He said I should move Olive into the garage apartment." Her hands clenched. "He said that, yes. That child has been learning to shrink," she said. "And he calls that practical." I felt something in my chest loosen at the sound of her seeing what I had been carrying alone. "He said he knows what's best." Lillian's mouth tightened. "He has said that his whole life." She reached for my hand. "This house is not a bargaining chip. It was built to shelter people, not rank them." I squeezed her fingers. "I don't want to fight him." "You don't have to fight," she said quietly. "You just have to stand where you belong." When I stood to leave, she added, "Your father assumes you will make things easier for everyone." I paused. "I always have." Her voice softened. "Then this is the moment that teaches them otherwise." That evening, back home, I walked through the rooms I had painted, repaired, and kept warm. Olive sat on the floor doing homework. "Mom," she said, "does Grandma like it here?" "Yes," I answered. "She does." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her work. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet of a house that had never asked us to prove we deserved it. By nightfall, the house sounded different. Drawers closed more softly. Tape peeled slower. I packed with the kind of care that comes from not wanting to wake someone who is already too alert. Olive sat on the rug with her backpack open, choosing items with a quiet seriousness. "If we're leaving," she said, "I want my rabbit where I can reach it." "We're not leaving tonight," I said, steady enough to sound convincing. She nodded, accepting the words without trusting them. She placed the rabbit inside anyway. I folded shirts into a box and labeled it books, then crossed the word out and wrote hers. The pen shook in my hand. I set it down and took a breath. At 10:48 p.m., my phone vibrated on the counter. The screen lit with a number I recognized from the assisted living facility. I stared at it until it stopped, then started again. A voicemail icon appeared. I listened with the volume low. "Ms. Moore," a woman said, careful and composed. "This is Dana from Maple Glen. Your grandmother asked me to pass along a message." She said to tell you to check the basement. Tonight. The message ended. No explanation. No warmth. Just the words. I set the phone face down and listened to the house. Olive's drawer slid shut in her room. The backpack zipper made a small, final sound. I walked to her doorway. She was sitting on the bed, hands folded in her lap. Can you stay here for a minute? I said. I need to check something. She did not ask what. She nodded and climbed under the blanket, leaving the backpack on the floor within reach. The basement door stuck the way it always did. I pulled harder than necessary. The light flickered on, revealing the freezer my father insisted stay plugged in just in case. I moved it with a grunt and noticed the wall behind it was painted a shade darker. My fingers found the edge of a panel that did not quite sit flush. I pressed. It shifted. Inside was a narrow cavity. I reached in and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed and labeled in my grandmother's careful handwriting. Beneath it, a stack of papers clipped together and wrapped in plastic. I did not open anything yet. I carried it upstairs like it might fall apart if I rushed. Olive peeked out of her room. Are we okay? We are, I said, because the words felt true for the first time all day. I sat at the table and opened the envelope. My name stared back at me, written without hesitation. The letter was short. It said my father had tried to move too quickly. It said the trust had been amended. It said to call the attorney listed inside. It ended with a sentence underlined once. Protect the child. They will not. I exhaled and opened the papers. Copies of statements. Handwritten notes in the margins. Transfers that did not match care costs. Dates circled. Questions written and answered with a single word, lied. Footsteps padded into the kitchen. Olive stood beside me, her rabbit tucked under her arm. She looked at the papers, then at my face. Do we still have to go? She asked. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. No, I said. We don't. She leaned against my side. Light, but certain. Outside. The night held steady. Inside. Something had shifted. I did not sleep after that. I sat at the table until the sky lightened, reading the same pages again and again, not because I did not understand them, but because I needed to believe they were real. At 6:30 in the morning, I called the attorney whose card had been tucked into the envelope. He answered on the second ring. This is Michael Avery, he said. My name is Bethany Moore. I replied. My grandmother is Lillian Moore. She asked me to call you. There was a pause, brief but weighted. She told me this call might come. That sentence settled something inside me. She left copies in the house, I said. Bank statements, notes, a letter. Yes, he said. The originals are with me. Your grandmother wanted redundancy. She amended the trust, I said. She named me as trustee. She did. He confirmed. 6 months ago. It was recorded and filed. I closed my eyes. My father brought a realtor to the property. He has no authority to do that, Michael said. Not anymore. Why didn't he know I asked? He assumed she would never move against him. Michael said. He was wrong. I flipped through the copies again. These withdrawals, I said. They are not care expenses. No, he replied. They are not? Over 2 years, I said slowly. It's more than $120,000. Yes. And the transfers to my sister? Yes. And the checks made out to cash? Yes. I let the phone rest against my shoulder. My hands were steady now. What do we do next? I send formal notice today, he said. Your father's access ends immediately. The accounts will be frozen pending review. When he calls, I said, he will. Michael replied, You do not engage? You let me. I thanked him and ended the call. Olive stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Are you mad? No, I said. I'm clear. She watched me gather the papers into a folder. Does Grandpa know yet? He will, I said. But not from us. She nodded, absorbing the answer without flinching. The phone rang again before noon. Dad's name lit the screen. "Why aren't the transfers going through?" he demanded when I answered. "I've changed the access," I said. "You had no right," he snapped. "I do," I replied. "I'm the trustee now." There was a sharp inhale. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "The amendment was filed 6 months ago. You went behind my back," he said. "No," I said evenly. "You went around my grandmother." His voice dropped. "You think you're protecting that child, but you're tearing this family apart." "I'm protecting her," I said. "That's all." He lowered his voice further. "Dangerous now. If you make this difficult, I can make it legal." I understood the implication immediately. Custody, stability, records twisted into weapons. "You can speak to my attorney," I said. "Any further contact goes through him." I hung up before he could respond. Olive looked up from the table. "Was that him?" "Yes." "Are we in trouble?" I knelt beside her chair. "No. We are setting boundaries." She considered the word. "Like when I say stop and someone has to listen." "Exactly," I said. The doorbell rang mid-afternoon. Kimberly's voice followed, sharp and insistent. "Bethany, open the door." I opened it but did not step aside. "You can't do this," she said. "Dad is furious." "I know," I replied. "You're choosing her over us," Kimberly said, her voice cracking. "Over family." "Yes," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. Behind her, Dad stood rigid, his eyes fixed past me, refusing to land on Olive, who hovered just inside the hall. "This ends now," he said. I reached back and closed the door. I locked it. Olive's hand slipped into mine, firm and warm. Outside, voices rose. Inside, the house held. I did not move. I let the weight of that decision settle, not as triumph, but as permanence. The knocking came just after noon the next day, not hesitant, not polite. 3 sharp raps that carried the expectation of being obeyed. I did not rush to answer. When I opened the door, my father stood closest, his shoulders squared like he was walking into a meeting he intended to dominate. Kimberly hovered beside him, arms crossed, eyes already wet. Derek stayed a step back, checking his phone, pretending neutrality. "You've had your moment," Dad said. "Now open the accounts. I've already spoken to the attorney." I replied. His jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide this." "I do now," I said. "It's in writing." Kimberly stepped forward. "Bethany, please. You're scaring everyone." "I'm not raising my voice," I said. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm stopping harm." Derek finally looked up. "This is extreme." "What was extreme?" I said. "Was taking money meant for Grandma's care and planning to sell the house without telling me." Dad cut in sharply. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "The statements are clear." He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "If you make this difficult, I can make it legal." I met his gaze without stepping back. "You already tried." Kimberly inhaled sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means guardianship reviews," Dad said smoothly. "It means questions about stability, about what's best for a child." I felt Olive shift behind me. I placed a hand back without turning, letting her know where I was. "That line," I said, "is one you don't cross. You don't get to rewrite the family." Kimberly snapped. "You're choosing her over us." "Yes," I said. "I am." The word landed harder than shouting ever could. Derek scoffed. "She's a kid. She'll bounce back." I finally turned then. Olive stood in the hallway, her rabbit tucked under her arm, watching every face. "She's listening," I said. "She always is." Dad glanced past her like she wasn't there. "This ends today." I stepped back and closed the door. The lock clicked into place. They did not leave right away. I heard my father's voice rise, then Kimberly's, then silence. I stood with my back against the door, feeling the solidness of it, the simple truth of what it meant to keep something shut. Olive tugged my sleeve. Are they mad? Yes, I said. Are we safe? Yes, I said again, more firmly this time. She nodded once, then relaxed into my side. Outside, footsteps retreated. A car door slammed. An engine started. Inside, the house was quiet. I did not celebrate. I did not shake. I stood there until the echo of their presence faded completely, until the boundary I had drawn felt less like a decision and more like a fact. When I finally moved, Olive followed me into the kitchen. She climbed into her chair and began drawing, her lines steady, unhurried. I watched her fill the page, and I understood that whatever came next, this moment would hold. The calls came first. Not apologies questions. Why can't I access the account my father demanded in a voicemail I did not answer? Kimberly texted twice in 1 hour. This is getting serious. Then, you need to fix this. I did not reply. The attorney handled the rest. Notices went out. Access ended. The language was precise, unemotional. It did not argue. It documented. 2 days later, my mother called. She had not spoken much since everything happened. I don't understand how it got this far, she said, her voice thin. Families don't do this to each other. I didn't start it. I said. She sighed. Your father is embarrassed. I'm protecting my daughter. I replied. There was a pause. You've changed, she said. Yes, I agreed. She did not mention Olive's name. She never did. That afternoon, Kimberly showed up alone. She stood on the porch, eyes red, arms wrapped around herself. We're struggling, she said as soon as I opened the door. Dad can't cover things anymore. Derek's hours were cut. I'm sorry, I said. You could help, she insisted. Just until we figure it out. I shook my head. No, her face hardened. You're letting the boys suffer. I'm not your backup bank, I said, and I won't trade my child's safety for your comfort. She stared at me, searching for the version of me that used to fold. When she did not find it, she turned and left. The silence that followed felt strange, not peaceful, but intact. Olive noticed it first. My phone buzzed once more that evening. A final voicemail from my father. You think you've won, he said, but you've destroyed this family. You'll regret it. I saved the message, not for revenge, for record. That night. Olive taped a new drawing to the refrigerator without asking. 3 figures holding hands, a house behind them, a tree beside it. This one stays, she said simply. Yes, I told her. It does. The house settled around us, not triumphant, just steady. The noise had stopped because the leverage was gone. What remained was quieter, heavier, and finally honest. Winter came quietly. No invitations arrived. No apologies followed. The silence settled in without drama, like a door closing on its own. Grandma Lillian came home for Christmas. She walked slowly, leaning on her cane, but her eyes were bright when she stepped inside. You kept it warm, she said, resting her hand on the wall. I learned from you. I replied. Olive hovered nearby, unsure, then stepped forward and held out a drawing. I made this for you. Lillian smiled. May I keep it? Olive nodded, proud. She did not glance at me for permission. Later, while we decorated the small tree, Olive dragged a stool into the backyard. She had painted the old birdhouse with careful strokes yellow sides, a purple roof, a crooked heart on the front. This one stays, she said, pressing the stake into the soil beside the maple tree. Yes, I told her. It stays. That night, after Olive fell asleep, I listened to the house breathe, not waiting, not bracing, just existing. I thought about the years I had confused endurance with love, about how easily silence can teach a child to disappear, about how boundaries, once drawn, do not need defending every day. If you're hearing this and recognizing pieces of your own story, if you've ever been asked to shrink so others could feel comfortable, stay with that feeling, you're not alone in it. Sometimes the bravest thing is not winning an argument, but choosing who you protect. In the morning, Olive taped a new picture to the refrigerator without asking. 3 figures holding hands, a house behind them, a tree with deep roots. I stood there a long moment, then turned off the kitchen light. This was not revenge. This was home.